The topic of children committing grave crimes is deeply unsettling, yet it has happened throughout history. In the United States, young offenders have sometimes received the harshest sentence, death. The stories are often complex, reflecting the crimes committed and the circumstances that led to those actions. As we explore these killer children, we will reveal their execution, last words, and last meals. Charles Rumbaugh. Charles Rumbaugh was convicted as a teenager of robbing and killing an Amarillo jeweler. Having been found guilty, he was executed by lethal injection early in Texas. This was the first execution in more than 2 decades for a crime committed by someone under the age of 18. On April 4, 1975, Charles walked into a jewelry store owned by Michael Fiorello in Amarillo, pulled a pistol, and demanded money. He struggled with Michael and eventually shot him. Before his execution, his last words were, "DJ, Lori, Doctor. Wheat, about all I can say is goodbye. And for all the rest of you, although you don't forgive me for my transgressions, I forgive yours against me. I am ready to begin my journey, and that's all I have to say." There was no record of a last meal. James Terry Roach. James Terry Roach was the second person to be executed for a crime he committed at 17 by the state of South Carolina after the reinstallment of capital punishment by the state. He was electrocuted on January 10, 1986 at 25 years old, nearly a year to the day following the electrocution of his accomplice, Joseph Carl Shaw, on January 11, 1985, at the Central Correctional Institution in Columbia. On December 13, 1977, upon the advice of his lawyer, Roach pled guilty to 2 counts of murder, criminal sexual conduct, kidnapping, and robbery. He was convicted of the rape and murder of a 14-year-old girl and the murder of her 17-year-old boyfriend. Evidence presented at the trial showed that Roach was mentally handicapped with an IQ between 75 and 80, and that he was probably suffering from Huntington's chorea. Moreover, the sentencing judge found that Roach was under the influence of Shaw when the crimes were committed. Despite these mitigating factors, the sentencing judge declared the death penalty. His last words were, "To my family and friends, there are only 3 words to say. I love you." He then gave a thumbs-up sign, reportedly to signal he was ready to die. There was no record of a last meal. J. Pinkerton. J. Kelly Pinkerton, convicted of the mutilation slaying of one woman and the murder of another, said goodbye to his father and was executed by injection 9 months after escaping the same fate by just 26 minutes. He was pronounced dead a few hours after his mother hand-delivered a letter from him to federal judges. His father, Gene, the only relative to witness the execution, gripped an aluminum rail in the death chamber a few feet from his son. "Be strong for me," Pinkerton told his father. "I want you to know that I'm at peace with myself and with my God. I talk to everybody on the phone. I got to talk to Mom. Say goodbye to Mom. Keep your spirits up for me." Then he chanted, "I bear witness to Allah. I ask for your forgiveness." "Bye, Jay," his father said. "I love you, Dad," replied Pinkerton, who then said, "I feel dizzy. I feel dizzy." He yawned, his eyes closed, and he was declared dead. Pinkerton, an apprentice meat cutter, was executed for raping and mutilating Sarah Dawn Lawrence in 1979 during a burglary of her Amarillo home when he was 17 years old. Mrs. Lawrence was stabbed more than 50 times, and her throat was slashed. Dalton Prejean. Dalton Prejean was one of 22 people in the United States executed for crimes committed as a juvenile. He was tried, convicted, and executed in the electric chair in Louisiana for the murder of Louisiana State Police Trooper Donald Cleveland. At about 5 o'clock on July 2, 1977, Prejean, his brother Joseph, Michael George, and Michael Broussard left Rogers nightclub in Lafayette Parish. The 4 had spent the night drinking in various lounges in the vicinity. They left Rogers nightclub in a 1966 Chevrolet driven by Dalton, with his brother in the front seat and the other two in the back. The car's taillights were not working, and within a few hundred feet of the lounge, Trooper Donald Cleveland, who was on his way to work driving his police vehicle, signaled the Chevrolet to stop. Prejean and his brother attempted to switch places in the front seat because the defendant had been driving without a license. The trooper noticed the switch and ordered the occupants out of the car. He told Michael George and Michael Broussard to get back in and search Joseph Prejean's body. Back in the car, Dalton Prejean reacted to the troopers pushing Joseph against the car over Joseph's protest. "I don't like the way he's doing my brother." Dalton then took a .38 caliber revolver from under the car seat, got out of the car, and approached the officer with the gun hidden against his leg. As he neared the trooper, he fired without warning. Trooper Cleveland was struck by 2 bullets and died. Dalton and his companions fled the scene but were apprehended several hours later. On May 18, 1990, Prejean was executed in the electric chair at Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola. His last words were, "Nothing is going to be accomplished. I have peace with myself. I'd like to thank those who supported me all these years. I'd also like to thank my loved ones for being strong. My son will be a better person if he does not let something like this bring down his life. Keep strong, keep pushing, keep praying." They said it wasn't for revenge, but it was hard for me to understand. I hope they're happy. So I forfeit my life. I give my love to all. God bless. There was no record of a last meal. Johnny Garrett. Johnny Frank Garrett was accused of murdering a Catholic nun who lived across the street from him. This incident happened on the morning of October 31, 1981. Garrett was 17 years old at the time. According to the prosecution, Garrett raped, strangled, and killed 76-year-old Sister Tadia Benz in the St. Francis Convent. On November 9, 1981, Garrett, who lived across the street from the convent, was arrested and charged with murder. Garrett was tried and convicted of the crime. He was held at Ellis Unit, north of Huntsville, Texas, which at the time held men on the state of Texas's death row. He was originally scheduled to be executed on January 6, 1992. But after Pope John Paul II asked for clemency, Governor of Texas Ann Richards gave him a reprieve. After Richards's reprieve, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles held a hearing on whether Garrett should receive a commutation to life in prison, but a 17-1 vote retained the death sentence. He was examined by Dr. Dorothy Otnell Lewis, who determined he had multiple personalities as a result of child abuse from his mother, grandmother, and grandfather. He was ultimately executed at age 28 in the Huntsville unit on February 11, 1992, by lethal injection. His final meal request was ice cream. His last words were, "I'd like to thank my family for loving me and taking care of me. The rest of the world can kiss my ever-loving ass." Curtis and Danny Harris. On December 11, 1978, brothers Curtis Harris and Danny Harris traveled with James Manuel, a friend, and Curtis's girlfriend, Valerie Rencher, to visit a friend in Bryan, Texas, only to discover she was not home. Then their car developed a fault. The brothers took their anger out on the car, tearing up the interior. The friends began to walk down Sandy Point Road, looking for a neighbor to help. A man on his porch said he had no cables to lend. Eventually, the friends were able to flag down a passing vehicle. Timothy Merca, a 27-year-old man, an employee of nearby Texas A&M, was happy to help. He had cables in the back of his truck. However, after 30 minutes, the brothers' car still did not start. Merca removed the cables, and while still acting as the Good Samaritan, he suggested a man down the road who could still help get the car running. This latest setback pushed the brothers over the edge. After a brief discussion, Curtis was handed a car jack and began to beat Tim Merca to death, while Danny held him down to make sure the job got done. Merca died after 15 blows to the head. The brothers then stole Merca's wallet, truck, and shotgun, leaving Merca's body in a ditch. Still filled to the brim with anger and adrenaline, they then robbed a convenience store of the money in the till and a change bottle with donations to the Multiple Sclerosis Society. The brothers were convicted and executed in July 1993. These were Danny's last words. "I would like to tell my family I love them very dearly, and I know they love me. I love all of the people who supported me all of these years. I would like to tell the Merca family I love them too. I plead with all the teenagers to stop the violence and to accept Jesus Christ and find victory. Today I have victory in Christ, and I thank Jesus for taking my spirit into His precious hands. Thank you, Jesus." Frederick Lashley. Frederick was convicted of the capital murder of his physically handicapped 55-year-old cousin and foster mother, Janie Tracy, while robbing her of $15. At the age of 17, Lashley assaulted Tracy in her St. Louis apartment on April 9, 1981, striking her with a cast-iron skillet and stabbing her, resulting in her death. He was executed by lethal injection in Missouri on July 28, 1993 for this act. Ruben Cantu. Ruben Montoya. Cantu was an American convicted murderer who was executed for a murder committed when he was 17 years old. Shortly after being convicted by a jury of first-degree murder and sentenced, Cantu wrote a note to the people of San Antonio saying, "I have been framed in a capital murder case. I was framed because I shot an off-duty police officer named Joe De La Luz." On August 24, 1993, at the age of 26, Cantu died by lethal injection, becoming the 5th juvenile offender to be executed by Texas. His final request was for a piece of bubble gum, which was denied. If he had a last statement, he said, "No, sir." Christopher Berger. Christopher Berger was executed by electrocution on December 7, 1993, at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia. He was 33 years old at the time of his execution. Berger had been sentenced to death for the 1977 murder of Roger E. Honeycutt, a part-time cab driver. Berger, who was 17 at the time of the crime, alongside accomplice Thomas Stevens, abducted, robbed, sexually assaulted, and ultimately killed Honeycutt by locking him in the trunk of a taxi and pushing it into a pond, causing Honeycutt to drown. In his final moments, Berger was reportedly visibly scared and shaken. Alan Alt, the Georgia Corrections Commissioner who oversaw Berger's execution, recalled that Berger expressed remorse, saying, "Please forgive me," shortly before his execution. His execution took place about 5 months after his co-defendant, Thomas Stevens, was also executed. Robert Carter. Robert Eugene Carter was an American man who was convicted of the 1953 murder of a Washington, D.C. police officer named George Cassels. On July 11, 1953, at approximately 5 p.m., Carter robbed a dry cleaning business of an amount of money between $54 and $115, striking the owner of the business in the head with the barrel of his gun and then taking money out of the cash register while the owner was disabled. An off-duty police officer with the District of Columbia's 3rd Precinct, who happened to be nearby during the robbery, 26-year-old Private George W. Cassels, chased Carter on foot following a verbal prompt from the business owner to stop that man. During the chase, Carter shot Cartel once. 2 days before his execution, prison officials permitted him to see his mother, wife, and children, at which point he met his 3rd child, then 4 years old, for the first time. The night before his execution, Carter was in what newspapers described as a catatonic state. Carter was executed on April 26, 1957. The method of execution was the electric chair, which was located in a cubicle on the 4th floor of the district jail. At his execution, witnesses described Carter as emotionless, although he smiled at the jail's Catholic chaplain, who attended the execution and uttered several prayers. Carter was 28 at the time of his death. Dwayne Allen Wright was executed on October 14, 1998, in Virginia for crimes committed when he was 17 years old. In October 1989, Wright attempted to assault sexually and subsequently murdered Saba Tekle, a 34-year-old mother of 3, outside her apartment in Annandale, Virginia. This incident was part of a 5-day crime spree, during which Wright also committed other violent offenses. Wright's execution marked the first time since 1924 that Virginia executed an individual for crimes committed as a minor. Advocates for clemency pointed to Wright's challenging upbringing, exposure to violence, and mental health issues, including borderline intellectual functioning and possible brain damage. Despite these appeals, Governor James S. Gilmore III denied clemency, emphasizing the severity of Wright's crimes. He didn't say a last statement, but his final meal was pizza, a cheeseburger, French fries, and apple pie. Sean Sellers. Sean Richard Sellers was an American serial killer. He was executed by lethal injection on February 4, 1999 at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma, 5 minutes after the lethal substances were injected. For his last meal, he had Chinese food: egg rolls, sweet and sour shrimp, and batter-fried shrimp. He began his final statement by addressing his step-siblings. "All the people that are hating me right now and are here waiting to see me die, when you wake up in the morning, you're not going to feel any different. You're going to hate me just as much tomorrow as tonight. When you wake up and nothing changes inside, reach out to God and He will be there for you. Reach out to God and He will heal you. Let Him touch your hearts. Don't hate all your lives. I love you all." Douglas Thomas. Douglas Christopher Thomas was executed on January 10, 2000, for crimes committed when he was 17 years old. In November 1990, Thomas and his 14-year-old girlfriend, Jessica Wiseman, conspired to murder her parents, J.B. and Kathy Wiseman, because they opposed their relationship. Thomas was convicted and sentenced to death, while Wiseman, tried as a juvenile, served a 7-year sentence and was released at 21. Stephen Roach. Stephen Todd Roach was convicted and executed for a brutal crime that took place in 1993 when he was just 17 years old. Roach murdered his 70-year-old neighbor, Mary Ann Hughes, in Greene County, Virginia. According to court records, Roach broke into Hughes' home, intending to rob her. During the burglary, he attacked her, tied her up, and fatally shot her. The motive appeared to be robbery and an attempt to silence Hughes as a witness. Roach fled the scene but was later arrested and confessed to the crime. He was tried as an adult and sentenced to death despite being a minor at the time of the offense. On January 13, 2000, Stephen Roach was executed by lethal injection at the Greensville Correctional Center in Virginia. Glenn McGinnis, a man who was still legally a boy at the age of 17, was sentenced to death for the killing of Lita Ann Wilkerson in Conroe, Texas, near Houston. He shot her 4 times in the head and back while robbing the laundry where she worked, then fled in her car. He declined a final statement before his execution.
In Texas, an appeals court has granted a stay of execution for convicted murderer Gary Graham. He was scheduled to be put to death next week.
Shaka Sankofa. Shaka Sankofa was a Texas death row inmate who was sentenced to death at the age of 17 for the murder of 53-year-old Bobby Grant Lambert in Houston, Texas, on May 13, 1981. Sankofa was scheduled to be executed 5 times, once in 1987, 3 times in 1993, and once on January 11, 1999, and each time he was given a stay of execution before it was lifted. He was executed by lethal injection on June 22, 2000, in Huntsville, Texas. Sankofa released a final statement in which he called his execution a legal lynching and genocide in America. He called his followers to take this down to the international court and file a lawsuit. He said his lynching will be avenged and the revolution will go on. Gerald Michelle. Gerald Lee Mitchell was executed by lethal injection in Texas on October 22, 2001, for crimes committed in 1985. At the age of 17, Mitchell arranged to meet Charles Marino and Kenneth Fleming under the pretense of selling them marijuana. Instead, he forced them to drive to a vacant house where he robbed and shot both men. Marino succumbed to his injuries, while Fleming survived by feigning death. Later that same day, Mitchell shot and killed Hector Manguia during an altercation over a necklace. Mitchell requested an assorted bag of Jolly Rancher candies for his last meal. In his final statement, Mitchell expressed remorse, saying, "I am sorry for the pain. I am sorry for the life I took from you. I ask God for forgiveness, and I ask you for the same." He also addressed his family. "To my family, I love every one of you. Be strong. Know my love is always with you, always." Napoleon Beasley. Napoleon Beasley was an American convicted murderer executed by lethal injection for the murder of 63-year-old businessman John Luddig in 1994. Beasley, who was then 17, shot Luddig in the head twice in his garage on April 19, 1994, to steal his Mercedes-Benz. He also shot at Luddig's wife, but missed. She survived the assault by playing dead. Beasley carried out the crime with two accomplices, Cedric and Donald Coleman, who later testified against him. Both were sentenced to 40 years in prison. His last words were, "The act I committed to put me here was not just heinous, it was senseless. But the person that committed that act is no longer here. I am. I'm saddened by what is happening here tonight. I'm not only saddened, but disappointed that a system that is supposed to protect and uphold what is just and right can be so much like me when I made the same shameful mistake." T.J. Jones. T.J. Jones was executed by lethal injection on August 8, 2002, in Huntsville, Texas, for the carjacking murder of 75-year-old Willard Lewis Davis. The crime occurred on February 2, 1994, when Jones, then 17, and three accomplices approached Davis as he was backing out of his driveway in Longview, Texas. Jones ordered Davis out of his car, and after Davis complied, Jones shot him in the head from a distance of 2 to 3 feet. The group then fled in Davis's vehicle, but was apprehended shortly after crashing the car. At his trial, Jones's defense presented evidence of his below-average intelligence and emotional immaturity, suggesting he had the emotional maturity of a 10 to 12-year-old. Despite this, he was found competent and sentenced to death. During his execution, Jones's last words were directed toward Davis's family. "I regret the pain I've put you through, and I hope you can get over it someday." He also expressed love for his own family, saying, "Mom and Dad, I love you. Take care. I'm ready." There was no record of a last meal. Toronto Patterson. Toronto Marquis Patterson was executed in Texas for a crime committed when he was 17 years old. He was convicted of murdering his cousins, 3-year-old Ollie Brown, 6-year-old Jennifer Brewer, and their mother, Kimberly Brewer, on June 6, 1995 in Dallas. The motive was reportedly to steal car wheels from a vehicle at their residence. In his final statement, Patterson expressed remorse but maintained his innocence. "I should be punished for the crime, but I do not think I should die for a crime I did not commit."
I was convicted on November the 17th. I was found guilty of killing my cousin Kimberly, Ollie, and Jennifer on November the 17th, 1995.
Scott Hayne. Scott Allen Hayne was the last person executed in the United States for crimes committed as a juvenile. Oklahoma executed Hayne for a double murder kidnapping he committed when he was 17 years old. On October 6, 1987, Hayne and Robert Lambert carjacked an automobile in Tulsa that Michael Houghton and Laura Sanders occupied. Hayne and Lambert eventually stopped the car, robbed Houghton and Sanders, and placed them in the trunk of the car. Hayne set fire to the car, which resulted in Houghton and Sanders' deaths. For his last meal, Hayne requested 3 cheeseburgers, 3 orders of onion rings, ice cream, and a slush drink. His last statement was not recorded. If you like the way we create these videos and you want us to bring more cases like this to light, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives.